I'm Lennox.
And I'm Moose.
And we are
Unapologetic.
Alright. Yeah, so Moose, we're back here again after a very long time.
Way too long, man. Way too long. What happened?
I don't know what happened. I guess, in a way, life sort of caught up with us.
Yeah.
That said, there's also been a lot of stuff happening in the background.
Yeah.
Which I guess a lot of people wouldn't be privy to.
Yeah. We'll let you know that stuff.
Yeah, we'll let you know about that stuff soon enough.
Solid, yeah.
A lot of stuff's been going on.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty. I'm really excited about what the future holds.
Me too.
And I really look forward to letting people in on what's been going on.
Yeah.
But man, it's great to be back.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Last time we did this, you weren't even married.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
You put a ring on somebody's finger, and she actually said yes.
And she actually said yes. Mm-hmm. Hey! You got engaged, huh?
I did. Yes, I did. Yeah. But yeah. So apologies for not putting out content for quite a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're trying to get things back. Moving, and there's just so much to talk about and so many things that we could tackle. But the topic for today, I think, is one that is, specifically interesting to our context.
Yeah.
It's a very hot topic right now, in especially in the West, but certainly here as well.
Yes.
And it is the topic of inequality.
Inequality.
Yeah.
Inequality. Yeah. Bro, I've heard this being thrown out in many different ways.
Yeah.
The different kinds of inequality that people would complain about. And of course, in their minds, they consider inequality as sort of injustice.
Yeah.
And you see this in many ways. You look at, for example, South Africa at the moment, and the big thing there is probably racial or ethnic inequality. And of course, reparations has become a big thing there.
Yeah.
You see a similar sort of thing in the United States happening at the moment as well. But you see various kinds of things. You and I spend a lot of time talking to feminists. And so, we hear a lot about gender inequality and economic inequality, even as it relates to gender inequality. So this is a word that we hear thrown out a lot. But I guess the reason why we're talking about this today is because I think there are a lot of misconceptions around inequality. And I think it's important to sort of talk about, I guess, what the Bible has to say about, about the way inequality is talked about today.
Yeah.
So,
Interestingly enough, I mean, one of the reasons we started this podcast in the beginning was, we were having these conversations.
Exactly.
Two of us,
Precisely.
or maybe a third person.
Precisely.
We wanted to bring other people into conversation.
That's right.
But in this topic specifically, I think there hasn't. I would say there hasn't really been that much conversation per se.
Yeah.
It's just you either agree or you're evil.
That's right.
That seems to me to be the...
Not even disagree, you're evil.
You're evil.
You either agree or you're evil. Yeah.
So, and we both agree that, what's sort of being propagated as the definition of inequality, and specifically the fact that in and of itself inequality is evil.
Right.
We don't believe that.
Right.
We don't believe that if there are rich people in a country and poor people in a country, that directly means that there is an evil that is happening.
That's right.
But this seems to be the popular definition.
Yes.
Inequality equals
evil.
injustice.
That's right. Injustice, unfairness.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that there's a historical context to this.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we could go all the way back to Genesis if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think a good point to sort of begin speaking, because it really was a turning point in history, was when Karl Marx,
he's basically the guy that
came about and
made it very popular.
He popularized this. That's right. And basically, the notion around what's considered classical Marxism is that disparities or differences between the rich and the poor is wrong, and it should be equalized. And if you can take away wealth from the rich, you're taking away their power and giving it to the poor who are in need of power. And basically you create some sort of equalized utopia of sorts.
I actually view it as a very materialistic way to look at the world.
Absolutely.
It's extremely materialistic. And that's it almost feels like we need to make a caveat.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not saying that, we shouldn't help efforts to alleviate poverty.
That's right.
And the people who are in need. I
That's
think
right.
that is a biblical obligation that Christians have.
Absolutely.
But there seems to be a conflation of that
Yeah.
and the fact that there are rich people and there are poor
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
Those are not the same arguments.
That's
but,
right.
In our day and age, we can't have that discussion.
Exactly.
If you think that inequality is not necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah.
again, you're an evil person. But Marx, I think, and I really recommend that everybody, including you, by the way, you haven't read. I really recommend that everybody read
The Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
I haven't read it from like cover to cover, but
Yeah.
I've read many excerpts from it, and
Yeah.
And by the way, yeah, the recommendation is not an endorsement.
it's
that's what's
not.
put out there. But I think it's a good thing to read to sort of make sense of where this kind of thinking started from.
Yeah.
And it's important to note because I think it's now spilled into cultural applications.
Mm-hmm.
I think Marx initially saw it as an economic,
system, yeah.
exactly, an economic revolution of
Yeah.
sorts.
Yeah.
But now
that's a great word
right.
to use, actually.
But now it's become some sort of a cultural revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the rich and the wealthy anymore. It's about it's really become a system that perceives every social construct to consist of two kinds of people: an oppressed group and an oppressive group.
Yeah.
And you see this in feminism. There's patriarchy versus women.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see this in ethnic wars. It's black people versus white people, or whatever other ethnicities might be involved.
Yeah. In sexual relationships.
Exactly.
It's the cis people, the straight people versus the gay
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
It's such a. I actually, in some ways, it's impressive how this idea has propagated itself into every avenue so well,
Right.
and created this system where that's fundamentally how we need to look at history. That's
Right.
fundamentally how we need to look at society today. It's oppressor versus oppressed.
That's right.
Um,
But I think one important reason why we also have to talk about this is the degree to which even Christians have sort of bought into this way of thinking. Where I think for me the sad thing is that it's almost like they suspend their Christianity in order to accommodate the cultural narrative. And there's a problem there because as Christians we must consider ourselves citizens of heaven before we're even citizens of this culture. Because when we get lost in the cultural narrative, I think that becomes the sum of who we are. We think that's primarily who we are, and that determines what we do and what we think, and what we say. But as Christians, we have to look at what God has to say about this. We have to be able to rightly diagnose the problem.
Which is not happening right now.
Precisely, which is not happening. Because when we rightly diagnose the problem, then we can give the right solution to the problem. And that's really what I'm hoping this conversation is also going to get into.
And in terms of, even the implications of this system, again, we see them everywhere, right? There's a huge debate right now. Even it's not as big here, but I think it's just because it hasn't been allowed to flourish, for lack of a better term here.
Right.
But we see this debate in, for instance, income disparities.
Right.
If we see that on average, men make 1 kwacha to every, I think the last statistic I saw was 0.82 ngwe that the women make.
Right.
This disparity proves discrimination.
Right.
The implication has become that a difference equals an evil.
Injustice, yes, right.
But the problem is, if this disparity proves nothing. No statistician would make a conclusion like discrimination just from viewing averages.
Right.
And despite that, it's a point that almost every feminist that we've talked to has made, that there's obviously income pay inequality and discrimination happening on those grounds. I actually looked into this not too long ago, and the data does not bear that out, and it does not bear that out for many reasons, but specifically if you're just looking at averages won't account for choices that
That's
men
right.
and women make, the
That's
number
right.
of hours that men and women make, whether it's part-time or full-time, what kind of job it is, the number of years of schooling. You know, you would have to look beyond the headlines,
That's
so
right.
to speak,
That's
to
right.
find that out. But people are, because the discussion has been decided that this is evil,
That's right.
won't look into this. And I think that it makes our ability, our discourse, you know, less effective and
That's
less
right.
efficient, and we don't get to the actual solutions of the matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you make an excellent and important point. There's a lot of things that are overlooked, and I think it's it's difficult to challenge the cultural narrative in that sense. It's difficult to have a different outlook.
Yeah.
It's difficult to even actually look at the data and interpret it correctly, because you will be slandered for it. But you're right in that, you know, whenever people see some sort of a difference between the rich and the poor, it's got to be a problem. And bringing it home to Africa, where, you know, Africa is known as the continent of poverty, so to speak. And whenever rich people rise up in Africa, it's like, yeah, there's a problem with that. You know, there's so many starving people.
Yeah.
How can you have millionaires and billionaires in Africa when there are people who can't afford food at all?
Yeah, and people attribute it to witchcraft.
That's right.
and
People
things
attribute
like
to
that.
witchcraft, and basically, and actually, it's interesting because this does feed into animism in a big way. And in an animistic worldview, someone becomes wealthy as a result of taking something from someone else. So basically, the poor people believe, oh, we're poor because someone has taken something from us.
Yeah.
And so the rich people are considered as people who are, I guess, thieves, people who have done this dubiously, people who've used witchcraft or whatever other means to gain their wealth. And so actually what you see, and you'll see this in several African countries, especially in low-income communities, people who might even be doing economically well in those communities, they make themselves still look poor, because they don't want to be seen to have risen above other people. Because
Getting rich becomes
precisely
a taboo.
getting rich becomes a taboo.
And it's interesting that you say that. One of the implications I've seen, at least, even in Christian circles, is people shocked to see a rich Christian within the church. You know, if somebody is doing very, very well and has lots of money and is very affluent.
Sure.
You know, there seems to be some kind of implication that something is off there.
Right.
You know, and this is especially true when the person is a pastor. You know, and you know, it's obviously because there are a lot of very wealthy people who masquerade as pastors who are doing a complete disservice to the Christian faith.
Yeah.
But it has morphed even in the Christian church to become a pastor can't be rich.
That's right.
A pastor can't be well-to-do.
That's right.
You know, and you know,
and so people take it on themselves to sort of like, it's our responsibility to keep these people humble.
Yes, exactly. You know, and man, there's so many implications, and we could go on and on to speak about it. But maybe we should focus in on what is the Christian response?
Absolutely.
You know, what is the right and true Christian response to the idea of inequality?
Yeah, I think a Christian response would be first to understand that just because there's a disparity doesn't mean that it's wrong. And we see this throughout Scripture.
Yeah.
The Bible does not condemn wealth.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't condemn even differences.
Yeah.
Even differences between the sexes, between men and women. I refuse to use the word gender. You know, differences between the sexes.
Yeah.
The Bible acknowledges that there are differences.
Yeah.
Many of these differences God created this way. And so I don't think inequality is all as unfair and all as unjust. Now, I think you gave a caveat earlier, and I think it's important to reinstate again. We're not saying that means we should neglect people who are in need.
Yeah.
In fact, quite the opposite. I think God would bless people with wealth in order to serve other people. The Bible commands us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we do have a mandate to be charitable and to take care of those who are in need.
Yeah.
But nowhere in Scripture will you see see disparity or differences always being a problem. In fact, some people like to point to the passage in scripture, the money is the root of all evil, and it's like, no, actually,
The love of money.
the love of money is the root
Yeah.
of all evil.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole other problem on its own.
Yeah.
But money is something that we that is important. I mean, for example, the Bible speaks about tithing. You kind of need money to tithe.
Yeah.
And God expects us to fulfill the cultural mandate and to create wealth and to be fruitful and to be multiply in various ways. And so that's never condemned in the Bible. But at the same time, and I think this is another point we can sort of angle in here, the Bible discourages slothfulness.
Yeah.
Now, I've said that off the bat. I'm not saying that all people are poor because they're slothful. I know some poor people who are very hardworking.
Yeah.
But often, the antidote to this problem of inequality often encourages laziness.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? I mean, usually, for example, I'll go back to what Karl Marx suggested. He sort of saw giving power to the state as the solution for it. We need an agent that's going to redistribute wealth in order to create a sort of neutral society where the poor people aren't too poor and the rich people aren't too rich.
Yeah.
That you sort of trying to keep them at the same place. Now, you see, the problem with this is that it encourages people who would then consider themselves victims to sort of sit back and wait to be given stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, to be honest, this is sort of why aid has become such a problem in Africa as well.
Yeah.
Because I think many Africans have now been encouraged to sort of just sit back and wait. We're poor anyway, so we're victims. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do to lift ourselves out of poverty.
Yeah.
After all, we're being oppressed.
Yeah.
We've been colonized. We've been sold into slavery.
Yeah.
Our narrative is just against us, and therefore there's nothing we can do. It's not our fault. In fact, even when you see me being lazy, that's not really me being lazy. That's me being hurt and suffering from the consequences of oppression. And that's what I mean when I say that the solution is very detrimental. It's very, very destructive.
Yeah, I don't think I could say it any better than you have, to be honest. Our culture, it saddens me to see how sort of complacent that we've become. I can't think of a better word than complacent that we've become to the status of things.
That's right.
And the other part of this is that this sort of philosophy of looking at inequality as the issue and government as the solution, more government control, is now government becomes God.
Exactly.
Government becomes the great equalizer.
Yeah.
And we put aside any objective view of value for human beings because they're made in the image of God in favor of a policy or plan by the government that first of all, just boils down your value to how much money you are.
Right.
So we're still in the same problem that we were in before. But, grounds that idea that, once the government has power, once the government has authority, they will reinstitute value into you such that you're in the same position as everybody else.
Precisely.
And that is obviously not a biblical framework to be in.
Exactly.
God is God.
Exactly.
Government is not God. And there should not be a sense of equating the two. They are not the same things. The government was instituted for primarily two roles, to condone good and to punish evil.
Amen.
Romans is very clear about that. Once we start making government the one that institutes value into us, there will be no value. There is no such thing as value anymore.
Absolutely.
We are image bearers, and that is why people who are affluent and Christians have a moral obligation to help, because they know that those people who are in need are fellow image bearers. They are just as valuable in God's eyes as the more affluent.
That's right.
But once it becomes about money, then society will break down. It will legitimately be a place where you don't have any money, you can be tossed aside and nobody needs to care about you.
Yeah, pretty
it's
much.
Completely unbiblical
Pretty
way
much.
to look at it.
At this point, I just wanted to make a reference to something that was published on the 3rd of September of this year, 2019, by Oxfam. And it was a paper on inequality. And basically, the 3 solutions that they gave to inequality was more inputs into public services, basically progressive
Taxation.
progressive taxation.
They're always the
exactly.
same.
And exactly,
The answers are always the same.
Yeah, all is the same. I think the other one had to do with it's slipping my mind now, but I think it had to do with like more policy change.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can find this. Just look it up on. You can Google that. And it's interesting that at least two out of these 3 solutions, in fact, actually almost all of them, have to do with giving the government more power in order to create a society that is more like economically neutral. It's interesting that, for example, the word progressive tax was used, and I'm just like, wow, meaning the wealthier you get, the more you're going to be taxed. And if you don't know, in Zambia, income tax is almost not quite, but almost at 40%, which is ridiculous. And that's just one. That's just one in one way that we're taxed. And so there's very little opportunity for people to actually create a lot of wealth for themselves. I think a few people will be able to break through. But everything is heavily taxed and heavily regulated. Government is very big in this country and many other African countries as well. And interestingly enough, it's actually created even more poverty. Poverty hasn't been alleviated because of it. It's actually created even more poverty. You have more people who are poor, and people who might have been on a path to gaining wealth. They're just taxed so heavily. They're completely brought back down. So it amazes me how an international NGO like Oxfam makes these solutions. But what I often notice, and I'm bold enough to say this, is that they never ever give success stories of places where this has actually worked.
Yeah, because it's never worked.
Precisely.
That is the big thing.
Precisely.
It's never worked.
In other
anywhere.
words, they're encouraging socialism. Right? Which has never worked anywhere. But mind you, I will be bold enough to say this: a lot of NGOs can only thrive in socialist countries.
That's an interesting point.
Really. A lot of NGOs can only survive in socialist countries. And so, yeah, anyway, I think this is just a good example that we actually have solutions that we hear around the world today that are very detrimental to society as a whole. And I think even undermine what God would have us do. It really limits people's ability to go and live out the cultural mandate and to be fruitful and to multiply. In essence, now it's like, instead of being fruitful and multiplying and being faithful to what God has called us to do, it's like, no, let's just sit back and wait for the government to give us everything.
And I think it stems, I believe, from a fundamental assumption that inequality equals evil.
That's right.
And until we're able to have an actual grown-up conversation about what the actual problem is, and I believe that poverty obviously is a problem and it's a problem to be solved. But for as long as we're looking at inequality as the primary issue to be addressed, I don't think that's ever going to be alleviated in our context.
Precisely.
But yeah, those are our thoughts.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how much more can be said, but we always love to hear from people who listen to this podcast. So if you've got any questions or comments that you'd like to make, please
especially if you disagree.
Especially if you disagree. Let's talk about it. Absolutely.
Let us know why. We want to be able to engage, and if the case is that we're wrong, we want to know. We want to know why. We genuinely are interested in the conversation.
That's right.
With people who disagree with us.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, really appreciate how you've been with us.
Yeah.
Did we even say this is season 2?
This is season 2.
This is season 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a bunch of content that we want to get to you, and we just love the fact that that you watch us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. That said, I'm Moose,
and I'm Lennox,
and this is
Unapologetic.